All right, y'all, this is an example of how to sew a snap-on. We're moving into our closures unit. We're gonna do a few different types of closure. We're gonna start with a snap. Here's what it looks like. It's got two parts. See those? Can you see how they're different? I like to call these the outies because they have that part that sticks out. And these are the innie snaps. They don't stick out. Beware, the back of the innie side looks like it's sticking out, but it's not. The thing you want to look for are these wires that you can see bent around in here. Can you see those? Those are springs that actually hold the snap in place when you snap it. When you're looking through the front, you can see them right there. Those two little vertical lines. This is the correct side of this half of the snap. This is not. You don't ever want to sew this out. So, this is the innie, this is the outie. And there's what it looks like on the back side. And they snap together like this. Ta-da! So, you got to sew both halves on. And for this sample, you're going to need a piece of muslin, some snips, and a needle and thread. Now, you want to take your muslin and fold it in half long ways, and you're going to sew one half of your snap here and one half of your snap there. That way, when they're done, you can fold it over and snap them together, just like magic. For sewing closures on, I always want you to use a doubled thread, just like we did in the catch stitch. So, you thread your needle and pull the tails until they are roughly the same length and make a knot. Again, sewing on snaps or hooks and bars or hooks and eyes or any other kind of closure, you want to use a double thread. Why? Because they undergo a lot of stress and strain. Imagine if there are two snaps here snapping together, people are just going to pull them apart, right? So our stitches have to be really strong and taut and hold on well. That's why we want to use a double thread. Trim the excess off there. And we'll start with the innie half of the snap. You want to center it on your sample, about like so. And you can't really pin snaps in place because they're not fabric. So you gotta kind of hold it in place. We want it to be right in the center here, left to right. It doesn't really matter how far you set it this way, but for our purposes, you want to center it this way. Now, when you're putting them on a garment, it really does matter where you place them, because if you don't line your snaps up properly, your garment won't close properly. It'll look funny. Have you ever buttoned a shirt one button off? If you don't sew your snaps in the right place, you can get that same effect. Now to start, I want you to hold your snap in place, and I want you to look at where that snap lays on that fabric. And I want you to sew in there. And you're gonna take that bite through the fabric and come up through the hole in the snap. Do we see that? Pull that thread down, and your knot should stop it right there. Now, we've gone through the snap once. We want to go in right next to where we were and come through the snap again, just like that. Do it again. Because we want to make these good and secure and we want to make them last, I want you to sew through each hole of the snap at least 4 times. At least. And that is sewing through like this, not the starting stitch or the next stitch that I'm going to take where we jump to the next hole. So I want to double check and make sure I'm still in the right place, and I am. And we've got 2 layers of fabric here. I want you to try really hard to put your needle into the fabric and travel over to the next hole without coming out the back side of the fabric. We don't want to see your needle back there. So what I did there, I've sewn through this hole about 4 times. I'm going to put my needle in and travel over to the next hole. Do you see how I'm coming out like that? pull that down. And I'm going to double check the back side. These are where my stitches were through the hole. That's great. And there's no line of where I traveled over. So now we want to hold this firmly in place and do what we did on the last side. Go in right next to the edge of the snap and come up through the hole. And you want to do that 4 times. Travel over. Oops. Make sure you got your snap in the right place and sew it down into the fabric, up through the hole in the snap. One more time. I do not expect you to sew this quickly on these, but you will get the hang of it and it will come through faster. Now traveled over and came up through the hole. This is the last one. And the reason I'm kind of speeding through this part is because in the same video I'm going to show you the other half of the snap as well. So now I've sewn through this 4 times. Go through just one more just for fun. Never hurts, y'all. And then we want to knot off. And to do that, we're going to do the same thing we've done a bunch of times. See where we've been sewing? I want you to go in right next to that and pick up just a couple yarns. Tighten that down. And then we're going to do the knots that we do. There's that tiny bite with just a couple yarns. There's my tiny loop. Oh, I made it a little too small. Well, I want to pass my needle through that, right? And tighten that down like a knot. Just like we do every time when we're finishing something off. And one more time just for good measure. Tiny bite. Small loop. Sorry my loops keep getting so ugly. But you get the idea by now. I think we've done this a lot. Sew through the loop. And there's your knot. All right. Cut that thread, and we're going to sew the companion piece on. Now, you're going to need to make another knot or get another piece of thread, depending on how long of a thread you started with. Oh no, my knot didn't take. I did something wrong. All right. Okay. Now I want you to take the other snap and sew it to this end. Right there, just like that. So it should look like this. And when you're done, you can fold it over and snap it in place. Now make sure your snaps are turned the right way. This is the innie side, and we've got the innie side up. This is the outie side, and we've got the outie side up. And to sew it in place, you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna hold your snap. You're going to go in right next to it and come up through the hole. I'm going to trim this tail a little bit. It's a little long and ugly for my taste. Now I've just got a mess. Sorry, y'all. All right, so I've got that first stitch taken. Now I'm just going to sew through this hole about 3 or 4 times. Then you travel over to the next one, into the fabric, and try not to go through the back side. And come out through the hole. Now this is a little tricky. You got to kind of work things around. What you can't do is just go straight from here to the next hole over. You have to actually take a little bite of the fabric. So if you're having trouble getting it all to happen at once, take your little bite of fabric, draw that down, and then come up through the hole. Rotate, and sew your second hole. 1, 2, 3, 4. Y'all, I say 4. 4 is a good minimum. 5 or 6 never hurts. Some people only go 3, and it makes me a little crazy. Take that little bite, travel over to that next hole. Two, 3, 4. And last one, we're gonna take our little bite here, right by the threads, and go over to that hole. Hopefully you can get that all in one move. If not, 2 is not wrong. Now see this little bit of extra loopy thread I have here? It's because my threads traveled through at a different pace. So I'm gonna do what we did on the last catch stitch video, and I'm gonna pull one thread until I get that to move. It's not that one, maybe it's this one. It is, now that's gone. And I can sew again. Around the hole. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we finish with a knot. We go in right next to our stitches, pick up just a couple of yarns. I like to draw the first one down all the way, and then I'll sew through those loops. Oh. Draw that down. There's my loop. I'm gonna sew through it. My threads are misbehaving. You see this tiny loop I've got here? It's because my thread, one of them's not traveling through at the same rate as the other. So now I gotta do that, pull the individual threads thing to fix it. And I cannot seem to get them individualized enough to figure out which is which. There we go. One more knot. You'll find that a lot of the things that are annoying happen right at the end of your sewing. Go through that loop, and there's your knot. Uh-oh. And that's that. You've sewn both parts of a snap if you've been following along. And now, the most satisfying part, you can snap them together. Ta-da! Look what you can do. That's sewing on a snap.